Okay, so we're halfway through turn 17. Not a lot to speak of in terms of German movement here. Just a little bit of restructuring. Nothing I really want to dive into specifically. We'll just take a quick glance across the front line here, starting in the north and working our way south and westward. So these are the German defensive positions currently. Again, we're just very quickly withering away, but movement's becoming much more limited for the Germans as the pocket that they are in starts to condense. You can see we have one building here along these lines. Along those lines there, it's just a very compacted area to what we're now confined to. Should the Russian advance continue pushing this way, then we will be pocketed here, which is not where the Courland pocket traditionally or historically was, which that should be up here. Keeping some mobile forces in reserve, decided to pull back my Panzer division a little bit further than sitting in the open fields here. It was a sitting duck. The Russians are starting to bomb more and more forward. So we're better off holding those units back and holding some more panzers in reserve here to reopen should we become pocketed, should Riga come under heavy pressure. It's so tempting to attack with those forces now, and I'm definitely feeling the pressure to do something. I feel like I'm stupid for not doing something, but the amount of supply just to move these units, as I said last video, is just ridiculous. Let's say I wanted to move 3 Panzer divisions, that's going to cost me 3 supply points without even paying for combats, barrages, anything like that. The Germans in the air war are not doing well. They're very weak in the first place, so not a lot of help there. They really have to commit these forces when the time is right, and it just doesn't feel right at the moment. So where do I think the Russians are going to go on their turn? Tartu's probably safe unless they can bomb some of these infantry forward. That out of supply stack there's Germans are still holding on to a 2 pop point city, the first city in Estonia, who's still been able to hold on to it. So we haven't actually lost any Estonian pop points yet. So which would be why the score is as it is, sitting at 26 pop points on a target of 29 for this turn. So the Russians need to, well, they may have the supply to attack there this turn. That's been their limiting factor. Attacking with all that infantry is quite expensive. And where else can we get one? Probably in here. I'm thinking we're going to capture this hex on the next turn, and we're going to make a hell of a go for it at the very least. Where else? If we get ambitious, we might aim here again and attempt to cut off and actually pocket, like I had said. So if we can attack at Tukums, and Jelvaya, or whatever the hell it's called there, we could get where we need to. It's only a 3 pop point lead at the moment, so nothing insurmountable for the Russians. So okay, so on to the Russian half of the turn. Alright, so turn 17 is now completed. Take a quick glance at the Russian situation here. Did not attack at Tartu, was not able to get infantry close enough for an attack on this turn. Did manage to DG it and hope we would win initiative into turn 18. We did not. The Germans again will be going first. But keeping them perpetually DG'd has really tied them down. There's a decent amount of force in Tartu. They have no headquarters in that area. There's not a lot of supply. Actually, I don't think they have any supply at the moment. And they are cut off from rail now, other than from a supply source hex at the map edge. But they have no way of getting any supply points in there except via air, which they may be able to do. Can they perform a fighter sweep or something along those lines? They might be able to fly something in. Supply is really the limiting factor here right now for the Soviets. Just not a lot to use. Everything we did have we used in an attack here, which we ended up rolling very poorly. Defender surprise, poor roll on the combat as well. So the defenders still remain in this hex. Yeah, I mean, that would probably be victory points for the Soviets had they been able to capture this here. They're sitting at 27 currently. That would have been 2 more. They would have at least not lost another victory point on this turn. They're down currently 4 victory points, so a lot to catch up on. Once these larger points start coming into the fold here, though, I think they are going to catch up in the scoring. The targets become much more slow in their advance on the next few turns. It's about 1 pop point per turn they need to gain. So that's 2 there, there's 4 there, there's 2 here. We've captured 1 over in this area here. So they'll start to add up very quickly, and with the disintegration of this front, this should be a pretty easy drive through the rest of Latvia. So okay, we'll move into the center here. And we did manage to capture that bridge hex that I was talking about earlier, right here. So that gives us a bridge connecting these 2 parts of the front now along this major river line. We were connected via Daugavpils, but bulk of my forces here, I can now march right across that bridge and join the attack towards Riga with a great number of these forces. Kind of unnecessary to fight here when I'm really just aiming for 1 pop point now left in this area. Riga is the real target. So the Germans again probably will see that as well and realize there's no need for such a massive forces here as well. I'll get more into the German situation in a moment, but nothing much to speak of further in the north here, or in the west, sorry. Kind of cleared our positions along that road line, went forward to meet the German positions. We've created some depth in our defenses here around our junction of the roadway and the railway there. Slowly converting our rail all over the map to try and catch up to these positions, but we're fairly comfortable on supply now up there and have extenders in place that we feel comfortable with our supply situation. Towards Riga, we've again met the major river line here, have units in and around Jelgava, attacked to the west of Jelgava, killing a AR-4 tank battalion, or assault gun battalion, something like that. So we now hold all approaches toward Jelgava, and Riga has now been cut off. These rail lines have been cut, and we've also cut here. So I think this is the opportunity for a German counterattack, is to try and free up these positions. Because Riga also has been bombed on this turn for the first time, their port capacity. Should it be bombed, take 2 more hits, it no longer functions as a supply source. And since we are cut off here, that would be our only supply source in this entire pocket. Would be out of supply if that were to happen. So we're going to have to pay to repair. I believe, I haven't done a port repair, I have to look at the rules for that. We will have to repair the Riga, because this pocket being out of supply would be very bad news. Alright, well, we'll stop here for a moment, and then I'm going to get into some of the German strategy going forward. There's a lot to consider as to how we're going to use some of these forces, what the plan of defense is here in this area, because I feel like we're defending a lot of empty ground at the moment, and I'm not sure that that's required. So stop here and we'll check back in once I've gathered my thoughts a little better. Okay, so let's take a closer look at the German positions across the front, and I'll talk a little bit about strategy and what I'm kind of thinking in each area. So here in Estonia, starting with Tartu, as I said before, we're pretty much cut off. So I think hunkering down, holding out as long as possible, finding a way to get some supply into here is the best thing we can do. A lot of units in here that I wouldn't want to give up, but we're fighting for 4 pop points, so I think it's well worth it here instead of for the 1s and 2s that I've kind of held units back for before. So moving along the line here, well, let's take a bigger picture look here first. I think if we hold these positions, we will be destroyed. There's too much force here. They've got some decent mobility if they can free up this tank corps. There is some armor in the area as well for the Russians. The Germans have decent mobility along this road, and they have armored units here that can move quite quickly. So what I think we need to do here is pull back to almost about these positions, ideally. Maybe here to begin as a staging area. We will garrison these pop points along the way. But I think if we can get out of the range of the Soviet supply network, which is going to come to a halt soon, they're on an extender to be in supply here. Some of these units are, at the very least. So the supply situation isn't great. So I think instead of defending open terrain with there's nothing to defend here, it's useless terrain to us. We're just defending these 2 positions, trying to hold on to Estonian positions. It's best to pull back. The Estonians can't leave Estonia anyways. These small units, each Estonian unit that crosses the border is forced to take a step loss. These are all 1-step units, so they would all be eliminated. So they will conduct the bulk of the defense of Estonia. They are very terrible, so that will not go well. But I think in terms of keeping a force that can actually properly defend Riga, we need to start building it now. The Russians are on the outskirts now, there and coming in here as well. So certainly under threat. We need to reopen this rail line. We can only repair 1 damage on this port per turn at a cost of 1 supply point. With the sea cap lowering no, that's the rail cap lowering. The sea cap will have a modifier come September when the Narva event happens for refugees using the shipping capacity. There's a variable amount of sea cap we can use every turn, so it's not reliable to try and get supply into here via sea. That will cease to be a supply source should it take more damage, and it's going to be hard to keep it from taking damage, the Riga port. So we want to keep these rail lines open. So here as well, I think the best thing to do would be a pullback. All these units are defending is 1 pop point now. So basically from here down, these units can haul ass back, I think. They'll have to move by foot since there's a zone of control on the rail line and it can no longer function for transport. So yeah, that's going to be slow. There is some mobility here, but a lot of infantry, so there'll be a slow pullback along these lines. I think this area here is where we start building our new defenses. I've already started building some hedgehogs because of some good variable roles for reinforcements. So Riga has some strong units in there. We feel fairly comfortable at the moment. We've got a major river line. We want to start garrisoning all sides of that. And here in the north, or I keep saying that, in the west, it's time for a counterattack, I think. We'll start picking away at these bits and pieces here, clearing up the rail lines, trying to get the Russians off of the river line there to Jelgava. That shuts down the port as well, cutting the river to the Baltic. That could be another supply source for us. So lots to consider there. Again, in the west here, we need to hold these ports as well. They are our supply sources. We will be feeding off near the end of the game. If Riga falls, we need those as supply sources. So I think this axis may change very shortly, and especially as those Russians are freed up, they may be able to start pressuring this way. So the German line will have to kind of come this way to defend those ports and make our Courland pocket, as historically happened, up here where those supply sources are. Right now, this counterattack should fix it. Hopefully I can make something happen. Should they be able to figure out supply, the Russians could drive through and start grabbing those ports, which would be disastrous for us. So that might be our impetus now to make something happen as the Germans here. Clearing those rail lines so we can maintain that supply flow as long as possible, build some good dumps in Riga, and start moving these forces over here to where they're probably more desperately needed. Should the Russians decide to get aggressive here, they could make short work of these very thin lines. It's about 1 unit deep with a few reserves here and there. So the Russians are just not going that way due to supply, trace supply, and the on-map supply is actually improving in this area. So okay, so I guess that is it. The Germans do have initiative and are going first. That's another reason I want to change the dynamics of what's going on here. The pull back, Russians meet us, pull back, Russians meet us. If we can pull back more so that we're not forced to take initiative with the chance of Russians getting a double turn, that would be hugely beneficial to the Germans' chances. We've been playing a very dangerous game of taking the initiative and giving the Russians that opportunity for double turn, because it could have ended in disaster here. On multiple occasions we've been lucky, and that luck won't hold out. So we need to change what we are doing, or something bad will happen. Alrighty, so that moves us into the 22nd of August under the marker there, and the Germans are sitting on 4 victory points currently. So on to turn 18.